Welcome back, y'all. So, the New Mutants are a group of mutants from Marvel comics where they are sort of like a new group of people next to the X-Men. The X-Men were a group of mutants in the universe, and they had been going on for like several decades at this point. So in the 80s, in 1982, writer Chris Claremont and artist Bob McLeod introduced a new group of mutants, the New Mutants. And this movie is sort of a rough adaptation of at least their introduction and the sort of like their attempt to introduce these characters into the Fox universe of Marvel Comics movie adaptations. It didn't go all that great. The movie is a little bit of a mess here and there. It's not all the way up to snuff, both just generally as a movie and even more so as an adaptation. Plus, it was very hampered by the fact that it came out in like August of 2020, which is when the COVID-19 pandemic was ongoing and there were a lot of lockdowns all around the world. So that naturally made sure that there was a lot less people going to the movies and, spending money to see this film. It ended up, there was like an idea of maybe doing a sequel, but in fact, they had ideas for like doing a whole trilogy, and they had like big plans for that. And reading back on it, it all sounds pretty cool. You can just look it up. But after this, just like the same week, they already announced, yeah, we're not gonna have any sequels to this film. They were completely unimpressed with the box office results. And of course, the studio executives were like, yeah, we're not going to shell out more money for more of this. So the film is essentially about 5 teenagers who are in this institute that is kind of like locked off from the rest of the world. The only person they are really in contact with outside of the 5 of them is the psychologist, this doctor, who is kind of like treating them for various traumas. So the film starts with Dani Moonstar, who in the comics is also known as Mirage. She's played by Blue Hunt, and this is Blue Hunt's film debut. Dani Moonstar's power is to manifest the darkest fears and secrets of other people around her, and she doesn't have great control over it, and that of course naturally causes a lot of problems. Her reason for being at the Institute specifically is because she is the only survivor of her entire tribe from the reservation of a massive tornado. At least that's what we are told initially. At the Institute, she meets 4 others. First of all, she meets Rahne and Sinclair, who in the comics is also known as Wolfsbane, and she is played by Maisie Williams, who is probably best known for playing Arya Stark in Game of Thrones. Rahne has the power to transform into a massive wolf, and she's here because she killed a priest who branded her a witch in her hometown. There is also Illyana Rasputin, also known as Magik, who is played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who previously starred in horror films The Witch and Split, and later on went on to star in Netflix's The Queen's Gambit, which literally came out 2 weeks after this movie came out. And she's been in a lot of stuff since then. Illyana Rasputin's power is that of dimensional sorcery. She can like pull out items out of another dimension and travel there. And she's here because she has trauma relating to sexual abuse and being held hostage as a child and like imprisoned and kind of like kept as a slave. Then there's Roberto da Costa, Sunspot, who is a Brazilian character, and he is played by Brazilian actor Henry Zaga. who later went on to play in the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare and Queer, which stars Danielle Craig. And lastly, there is Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, who is played by Charlie Heaton, who previously played in the horror movie Marrow and later starred in the Stranger Things series in all of the seasons. Hold on, no, he would have starred in Stranger Things before this as well, because Stranger Things has been going on for so fucking long at this point. Like, what, 8 years? But Sam Guthrie's power is to shoot forward at jet speed and basically become temporarily invincible. And he's here because he accidentally collapsed a coal mine that he worked at while his brother and father were inside. The doctor who's treating them is Dr. Reyes, played by Alice Braga, who is a white Brazilian actress who previously also acted in City of God, this Brazilian movie that is very well known, and the horror movie I Am Legend with Will Smith. She also has a superpower, namely that of protecting generative fields, which she uses to bubble all the way around the compound that the kids are at and to keep them inside there. She is here because she is researching the kids' powers. And over the course of the movie, we discover that she's doing this on behalf of the Essex Corporation. And this isn't really like elaborated on further in the movie, but in the comics, that is, if you are familiar with it, you would know that this is essentially the character Mr. Sinister, one of the biggest X-Men villains of all time, who does a lot of stuff with DNA research and cloning. And Dr. Reyes' purpose in this movie is essentially to steal DNA from these kids to send them to the Essex Corporation so that they can make use of that. The kids are being told that they are here to be trained to become part of the X-Men and, you know, protect the world and have a safe place to live as mutants. But they get told, oh, you have this trauma you need to overcome first. You need to learn to control your powers first before we can send you off there, before you can become X-Men. But this is all a lie. And over the course of the movie, you kind of like learn that. And there's this problem. There's something that goes wrong with Dani. She kind of like falls unconscious, faints at some point, and the doctor like carts her off to kind of like treat her. But what she's really planning to do is to assess whether she's dangerous. She gets assessed as dangerous by the Essex Corporation and ordered to steal her DNA and kill Dani. Now, the others end up trying to like save her from this, but this kind of like goes a little wrong. And there's this demon bear that gets released and kind of like goes ham on all of the others there, and the entire group like has to team up to fight off this giant demonic bear. And at some point Dani realizes that this bear was the cause of all the deaths at her reservation. Her powers were, and she only becomes able to control them after having like a vision of her father talking to her, and she learns to kind of like control herself, control her powers, approaches the bear and just kind of like gently pets it, doesn't fight it, and the bear disappears. So it's kind of like a bit of a story of self-acceptance and growing up as well. Classic YA coming of age type things. Now, after that, the doctor is defeated. The bubble goes down, and they manage to escape the compound. And that's about it. That's the end of the movie, and it leaves things very open-ended. You could very easily have gone on to create more movies with this, but the way that the story is told, it's simple, it's basic. There's not a large cast, so you don't need to have a huge investment in this. They probably didn't have a huge investment in this. and it's okay. The horror in this is largely from like the presentation, the visions of their traumas that these kids see. You can really like get into their heads and mindsets with all of this, and you're really rooting for them to overcome their hang-ups, their traumas. But overall, the movie was just okay, unfortunately. The actors gave it their all. I think that each of the actors are also pretty good in like their other works. Each and every one of them that I have seen. I have seen more stuff with Maisie Williams, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Charlie Heaton, and Alice Braga. I like their stuff. I haven't really seen any other things with Blue Hunt or Henry Zaga, but they don't resemble their characters. The adaptation is pretty bad as an adaptation. As a movie, it's okay, but as an adaptation, it's shoddy. Like the artist Bob McLeod even mentioned it at some point on social media. You know, he was disappointed that Dani doesn't have a braid in her appearance here. He's disappointed that Wolfsbane is not a redhead, for example, that Roberto da Costa, Sunspot, is white because he's a black Brazilian in the comics. You might, if you haven't read the comics, you might have seen X-Men 97, the cartoon series, where he shows up from like episode 1, and you would know that he looks very different there. Similarly, Dr. Reyes, played by Alice Braga, is a black Puerto Rican in the comics, not a white Brazilian woman. So it's all kind of very different on that front. Cannonball was intended to be like a tall, lanky dude, and Charlie Heaton is tall-ish, but I wouldn't exactly call him lanky, although the clothing choices that they gave him do kind of like very fit that. So upsides and downsides here and there, I suppose. One thing that is also kind of like a little funny just to me, as a final note, is that they are still called the New Mutants, these characters, even though it has been so long. Because at the time they were like the New Mutants, but that was 43 years ago at this point. There's a host of other characters who are mutants, who have joined the X-Men at some point, who were introduced even after the original run was cancelled in 1991. Just to rapid fire kind of like name a whole bunch of characters who are mutants, who have been introduced in the Marvel comics after the original run for the New Mutants got cancelled in 1991. Let's just go through the list real quick for like a few of the highlights. There's Bishop, there's Kwannon, Psylocke, there's Marrow, there's Armor, there's Pixie, there's Fantomex, there's Domino, there's Laura Kinney, also known as X-23 or Wolverine, there's Hope Summers, there's X-Man, there's Warbird, there's Blink, there's Monet, there's Doop, there's this guy, there's Celeste Cuckoo, there's Esme Cuckoo, there's Irma Mindy Cuckoo, there's Phoebe Cuckoo, there's Sophie Cuckoo, there's Glob Herman, there's Eye-Boy, there's Shark Girl, there's Egg, there's Meme, there's Gabby Kinney, also known as Honeybird, Badger, or Scout. There's so many other ones that have gotten introduced since then. And that doesn't take away that the original group is still called the New Mutants, of course, but it's just a little funny to me that we are still calling them the New Mutants nowadays. I guess they're also like, they were intended to be new to the X-Men movie franchise universe here. But unfortunately, they very much failed, and now those movies are technically part of the MCU instead. So we'll see how the MCU is going to handle the X-Men, how the MCU is going to handle the New Mutants, and how the MCU might handle that whole list of characters that I just mentioned. Because I would honestly love to see a lot of those other newcomers, relative newcomers, because that's been since 1991 at this point. Jeez. How the MCU handles all of that. The MCU is highly due for a bit more horror beyond just Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, kind of, and the Marvel Zombies TV show. Yeah. Either way, that was the New Mutants. I think it is decent, but you just shouldn't like get your hopes up that you're like watching absolute cinema or anything like that. But then again, if you love horror movies, you gotta love a little lower quality stuff from time to time. Even if it's not lower quality in this kind of sense that I usually prefer my horror movies to be. So yeah, I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.